All right. Hey, welcome to another episode of the Give Me Liberty podcast. A growing number of young evangelical Christians are drifting further and further to the left in their opinions on a host of political and cultural issues like same-sex marriage, abortion, and even climate change. Some, even though they may be well-intentioned, have been deceived into thinking that the best way to counteract the so-called climate crisis is to eliminate private property, capitalism, and limited government. The climate crisis has never been about the climate. Shocker. But the left has made it abundantly clear the climate change movement is about the redistribution of wealth. Here to discuss all this and more is Jason Mattera. He joins the Give Me Liberty podcast starting now. And welcome back to the Give Me Liberty podcast. I'm joined by writer Jason Mattera, who wrote an article just recently on why young evangelicals are in danger of becoming puppets for climate Marxism. Jason, welcome. By the way, thank you for all the work you do for the Standing for Freedom Center.
Well, I appreciate being on, Ryan, and it's my pleasure. I enjoy writing for you guys.
Well, this is spot on. This article is you hit the bullseye, you hit the target. Marxism seems to be so pervasive in our culture, society today, has been for several decades. It's on the rise, but the influence, particularly in the church and among evangelicals, so-called, and the reason I say so-called is because, we don't actually know what's going on in their heart. We don't know actually what's going on in their particular churches. I just know that there are people who claim to follow Christ, but you cannot follow Christ and be a disciple of Karl Marx. There is absolutely no way, shape, or form that can happen. But there's also this influence of Marxism in several areas in the social justice movement. And then there are those who, whether they want to call it creation care, climate change, whatever it might be, I certainly believe that as Christians following Christ, we need to be good stewards of the creation that God has given us. But even in the creation mandate, we have to recognize that we exercise dominion, rule, and authority over creation as well. And that means advances in technology, advances in energy, right? And all kinds of other quantitative and qualitative decisions we have to make in the best interest of our children, in the best interest of our country. And so what's interesting is you hit the nail on the head in terms of the hysteria and the way that evangelicals, yet again, are being used as puppets in order to advance not creation care, but climate Marxism. Talk about that.
Yeah, 100%, Ryan. And you got to love the nomenclature here, creation care. Like, who's against creation care? They always frame it in these this way that it's like, how can you be against this and be that kind Christian, loving your neighbor? Because of course we're for creation care, but the question surrounding that, or the follow-up question is, by what standard are you talking about creation care? And the progressive left loves to do this. They'll take a truism about the Bible, justice, and then they'll define it as Karl Marx or Bernie Sanders would define justice, which is antithetical, as you opened up. Now the Bible would define justice, and we're seeing the same thing with so-called climate change. Well, of course, the climate is always changing, but man's culpability, supposed culpability in the climate. And you're right, young evangelicals are fresh prey. For starters, they're young, they're ignorant, they want to make a difference in life. They have that zeal and that passion, and the left sees them as a way. And CBS News profiled a young girl, and they used her sort of as a template of how can we get Christians to buy into the left's global warming claims. And CBS admitted that out of all the religious groups, voting blocks out there, it seems like evangelical Christians, thank God, are the only ones who aren't even close to buying into the left's claims. Therefore, they're not even close to getting power. The left wants power at the end of the day. So how can we, chip away and get the left to get young Christians and Christians in general to go ahead and give progressives more power. So that's sort of the backdrop to all this. It's about gaining more power and centralizing the state even more than it is now. It has nothing to do with climate or creation care or any of that. They just find these sort of, and I'm not trying to use the term, it's going to sound negative, but I'm not trying to use it descriptively here, the phrase useful idiot. And it was popularized by Soviets that they can dupe American liberals who weren't Marxists, but they can unwittingly share communist propaganda, even though they're not commies themselves, to try to make communism more palatable to the average American. And that's what we have going on here.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, it's interesting. You go back to the era of the Soviet Union and the Cold War there. A lot of people look at that era as an argument around economic Marxism, right? Mainly about, what is the best way to order society? What are the best systems? Is it the free market, free enterprise, right? Democratic capitalism, as Michael Novak called it back in the 1980s. A democratic republic or a pure democracy or socialism, democratic socialism, or even communism. And today, it would seem as though the Chinese Communist Party had learned a lot of lessons from the Soviet era in terms of how not to approach it. And if it's a pure economic war, they were going to lose. But now it's more about a kind of soft totalitarianism, and it's really about a cultural Marxism. And it's around all of these various social issues, social justice. It's really attacking the heart and the mind of young people in particular. And so there is this, when you use the term useful idiot, historically, it's about the naivety of the young class, right? I think one of the things that Winston Churchill famously said, if you're young and you're conservative, it's basically you have no heart, right? But if you're old and you're liberal, you have no brain. And he was saying it is absolutely normal for a young person to lean more liberal. They're thinking with their heart. They're thinking with their feelings. They're not actually thinking, but they're feeling. And there is something that is natural. There's a natural inclination. And then as you understand more about scarcity, if you understand more about various political systems, if you understand more about causality, cause and effect, and you understand the correlation of how these movements grow and how these movements die, you're not naive anymore, hopefully. But cultural Marxism, the focus that the Chinese Party has had for Communist Party has had for decades, is basically attacking the hearts and minds of the youngest generation, and they're exporting this worldwide. They're using things like TikTok and social media to get it out there. Climatology seems to largely live in the social sphere. These are not scientists by any stretch of the imagination. It's just young social media influencers who are passing along this propaganda at a very fast churn rate. Most of the engagement that they have is less than 60 seconds long with the issue. They're not reading any journals of scientific research or study. And so yes, I'm seeing it over and over again. But what's interesting, and you point this out in the article, you have young evangelicals who are basically passing along kind of the same language we saw during COVID, love your neighbor, Matthew 22 language, love your neighbor as yourself, right? The greatest commandments, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and then to love your neighbor as yourself. I'll say this, and Jason, I know you'll agree. John chapter 13, Jesus says to his disciples, a new commandment I give to you, that you love one another as I have loved you. And there is a difference there. There is a heightened expectation. There is a calling, that there is a new standard that Christ placed. First of all, he gave up his life, but there's an embodiment of truth there. This is not just about, a warm cup of chicken noodle soup wrapped in love. This is about loving people truthfully. Jesus had hard moments in his teaching where he was loving his disciples, but he was saying things that were very difficult pills to swallow. And I think that's what is lost in Christian love today, and this kind of ethos of Christian love, that when we talk about it, it seems as though we don't think of truth as love. Love is also comes in the instrument of a scalpel, that it's going to cut away like with a surgeon's precision at the cancerous cells that are overtaking us, that we have to recognize that also love is about attacking those very things that are there to destroy us. But anyway, I want to hand this back over to you because I think it's an important conversation. Why, in today's day and age, why is it so important for young people to understand that human activity isn't the only thing that is causing a change in our environment? I think you talk about Kyle Beisner and some of the research done there, but human activity alone does not explain the change we've seen over the past 100 years.
No, there are limitations to the models that are out there. And if you talk to more level-headed scientists, you mentioned Kyle Beisner, who studies this. He's with the Cornwall Alliance. It's a solid Christian organization that gives true biblical stewardship models and research papers, as opposed to the phony ones who, as you mentioned, is love your neighbor, adopt AOC's Green New Deal, or whatever
right.
carbon zero policy is being pumped out of the White House, and that cheapens really the Christian message, because, as you know, it divorces love from truth and God's sacrificial love, right? It was Jesus dying on the cross for us because we were so dead in our sins. We violated his law to such a degree that the only way we can have eternity with him and have a new life was death. It was a blood sacrifice. That is love.
Yeah.
And then Paul goes on to say is the fulfillment of the law. I mean, so for Christians, as you say, I'm sort of skeptical. I'd like to anyone promoting AOC's Green New Deal or one of these left-wing policies. I think if you actually got down to it and asked them on what their thoughts are on the exclusivity of Christ, or what they believe about biblical sexual ethics or transgenderism, I think it would, you probably get an answer back. I don't know. I think you and I have different definitions of Christian.
Right.
But that aside, there is a wide variety of scientists out there, and Judith Curry is someone we mentioned in this article. She's no right winger by any stretch. She was decades. She spent at Georgia Tech University. She was considered is considered a premier climate scientist. And she said, at the end of the day, there's consensus on very, very little out there.
Yeah.
There's no consensus. There's consensus that over the last 150 years, the planet has warmed. There's zero consensus if man is culpable for that warming or what his culpability is. There's no consensus on if warming is bad for the planet.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that's kind of a big deal. All right, the planet might be warming. Is it bad for the planet? We know that the number of severe weather-related deaths over the last 100 years have dropped significantly, like 97%. We're able to manage and deal with advanced notices and getting out there so people can get out of these hurricane or tornado paths where they couldn't previously. We have better infrastructure today. And then you have to look at the trade-offs. I mean, you had mentioned something I think is noteworthy, that Winston Churchill quote, that people who are young and zealous, they tend to be more liberal because they think they can change the world. And as you get older, you realize the world is really not about solutions per se, it's about trade-offs. So if you look at, okay, we can get rid of fossil fuels, but that means that the expense of energy is going to skyrocket. And is it really loving your neighbor to force them into an electric vehicle that may be double the cost of their standard engine today, or have them suffer through rolling blackouts like they go through in California pretty regularly during the summer if they have a massive heat wave? So, so the more level-headed person, more people, more conservative, they say, all right, we're going to deal with trade-offs. You want to get rid of fossil fuels. Okay, that's going to have an impact. Can we live with that impact? What is that impact? Or we're going to keep fossil fuels and it's cheap, it's abundant, it's going to drive down energy prices. It has what has created the economic opportunity, the infrastructure in this country, just the worldwide development has made us the leader. Are we really going to deny that to third world countries and deny them no less from our air-conditioned cubicles, as many of these climate leftists want to do. But even if we put all that aside, if we put all that aside, the science aside, I do not believe the Barack Obamas of the world. I do not believe the Al Gores of the world. I do not believe the Nancy Pelosi's of the world when it comes to climate change, because all of them have bought oceanfront property.
Yeah.
Massive, sprawling estate. I mean, Obama and Martha's Vineyard. I'm in Florida, and Nancy Pelosi bought something on Jupiter Island, not too far from me. Okay, Nancy Pelosi, you've been telling me for decades in Congress that Florida is going to be underwater.
Yeah.
Al Gore made a movie about it, and you're coming to Florida to have a vacation home, maybe your retirement home. Seriously? So if you track these people not by their message, but by their actions, it's telling a completely different story. So at the end of the day, that's when we peel it back, and it gets back to worldviews. It gets back to worldviews. It's how do you actually view the world? Do you view the world as we're just stewards of the world and we have to manage the planet, not destroy it, and steward it with godly care? Or do you believe, as the left does, that they're sovereigns, that they have the arrogance, that the climate is like a thermostat and they can just tinker with it, and they can say, all right, we're going to change the entire ecosystem. We're going to control the weather globally. The amount of arrogance, Ryan, that takes. I think that the right government policy, the right tinkering, trillions and trillions of dollars can actually change on a worldwide scale. The temperature can actually stop tornadoes from happening, or hurricanes from happening, or any severe weather incident from happening is the fatal conceit of liberalism.
Yeah.
Is they think they are equipped with a level of intellect that they just purely are not equipped with.
Yeah. No, I totally agree.
So you're looking for a university that's perfect for you, a school that has anything you could possibly need.
Anything?
You want a place that has the programs you want to study, and maybe a few more just in case you change your mind.
I think I'm going to sign up for the fashion design program.
All right. A place with state-of-the-art facilities. I mean, look at this campus.
And who doesn't love big-time sports?
And great recreational activities.
Okay, now we're on a roll. Somewhere you can hike, slide, strike, shoot, climb, eat, and most importantly, eat. You want a place that takes you to space? Okay, maybe not, but we can teach you how to fly, or pastor a church, or run a business. And all that with a great view? Yeah, I think I know a place.
You know, you mentioned the oceanfront, beachfront properties. I remember it was in Inconvenient Truth where Al Gore, back in, 2000 and maybe 5 or 6 or whenever that movie came out, that he basically was saying, New York City was going to be underwater by a certain time. We've already passed that expiration date, by the way, and that has not happened. And the inconvenient truth in reality is the opposite, that if you were to look at degrees centigrade, degrees Fahrenheit, all the degrees even in Kelvin, that they have measured the worldwide average temperature, and it has actually not increased at all over the past 30 years in terms of climate temperatures. And you look back historically, I think it was the 1930s Dust Bowl, for example. I had many family members, great-grandparents who were displaced because of the Dust Bowl period of time in our history during the Great Depression. You have a lot of farmers and farmland that had no form of irrigation, had no way of watering without rainfall, and there was a period of time where it was extreme drought. I mean, this was a major part of our history where for a greater part of a decade, there were large tracts of land in Oklahoma and Arkansas and Kansas that were heavily impacted by that drought season. I do think that when you look at, the hypocrisy, not only of where they buy real estate, but if they really did believe that this destroyed the planet, they're using fossil fuels to fuel their car, to fuel their private jets, by the way, to go across the country to deliver these kinds of speeches where they wag their finger at 99% of the population. And they raise this hysteria. It is all about, for them, it is all about the donor class and raising money off of this. It's politically very easy. The other thing is going back to the Marxism part of climatology and kind of the scaremongering. This is about redistribution of wealth. This is about, and by the way, not their wealth. I want to be really clear. The political classes and the elites are always protected from this kind of redistribution. It's the middle class that suffers. It's the working class, those who pay taxes on the backs of their own labor. These people, the vast majority of Americans are not, paying a capital gains tax every year because they see their stocks going up and up and up and up through the roof. They're getting taxed upon their effort. And a lot of what climate Marxism is about the redistribution of wealth. There's an old Phil Donahue episode back in the 1990s, and Rush Limbaugh went on. I'll never forget, Phil Donahue interviewed Rush Limbaugh, and he asked him, what do you think that it wasn't climate change, it was global warming at the time. What do you think global warming is really about, Rush? And he said, it's about the redistribution of wealth. It is about foisting upon an unsuspecting public Marxism. And that was 30 years ago. And I still believe that firmly to this day. Rush, in many ways, was a prophet on these things. I didn't always agree as a Christian. I didn't always agree with Rush Limbaugh, but he was largely right. His political instincts were correct on these issues. And it's foisting upon the American public this idea that if you don't do this, if you don't vote against your own interest here, if you don't turn off that car that's sitting in the driveway and switch to electric, if you don't, put a bunch of solar panels on your roof, right? Which, by the way, can't possibly power your own home. If you don't put a bunch of wind farms and all of that, this world is going to completely crumble and be destroyed by fire. So it's creating this hysteria, but it's largely about voting in these economic systems that are going to change fundamentally how we function as a free society.
Yeah, well, it's emotional blackmail. That's what the left does constantly, right? If you don't adopt our policies, you must hate the planet. You must hate Earth. You must hate your neighbor. You're not loving your neighbor, right? But they do it with every single one of their policies. Oh, you want to scale back the welfare state because it's immoral and inefficient and is based on theft. Oh, you must want kids to starve in the street, Jason. So everything they do has that blackmail feel to it. It's not arguing on the merits. It's arguing through just their pure emotional instincts in these areas. And it all comes down to power. And when you say Marxism, I want people watching and listening to understand that in the article that you're referencing that's on Standing for Freedom site, is we actually quote the people in their own words, saying this is about reorganizing the economy. It's about taking the capitalist model of the Industrial Revolution and turning it upside down. This is our once in a lifetime chance to do this. It's time to get rid of capitalism. And I mean, they're open about the way to go. And it's obvious. If you look at their policies, it's all about a command and control sector. They're going to control the energy sector and everything that flows from it. So it has that Marxist lust for power with them. So we have to keep that in mind always. But you triggered a thought in me, because actually been in Florida about a year now.
Yeah.
And I'm like, if there's a place to have solar panels, it's probably Florida, right? I mean, it's sunny all the time, and in theory, in principle, I'm not opposed to solar panels or energy from the sun, or I just want the market to decide, not politicians in Washington D.C. who are just ill-equipped. So I looked into it. I investigated. All right, how much would it cost to outfit my entire house with solar panels, where I wouldn't be reliant on any other source of energy? Wouldn't need a generator if there's a hurricane, none of that. I would just have my Powerwall batteries, whether they're Tesla or another company, and just solar panels on the roof. This is most people don't realize until you can investigate it. It's such a scheme for those who are wealthy to lower their tax bill, to lower their tax liability. So the federal government, and depending what state you're in, will give you a massive tax write-off, upwards of 30% federally, and then you can add to it if your state like California or New York. And so what they do is you put the expense, you spend upwards of, to get an entire house, it can be upwards of $100,000 to outfit your home with solar panels and all the batteries. And then what you do is you get a tax write-off for your tax, your tax liability. So even though you put in $100,000, but when you have to pay the tax man, you can write off up to 50, maybe 60% of your tax bill the following years or subsequent years that you install any type of these renewable energy products.
Yeah.
So who has the money to be doing that on a regular basis? It's certainly not the working class. It's certainly not the poor. The left supposedly champions and claims, the champion, the working people. No, it's people like the Al Gores of the world who can say, well, if I can drop $100,000 and outfit my entire, for him it would be a lot more, because he has a 10,000 square foot home in Tennessee, and his energy bill is more than we would have an entire lifetime in energy consumption. So he's a hypocrite on that part. But I think bottom line, it comes down to a hierarchy where the left says, how can I get the middle class to subsidize my lifestyle? Not that I want solar panels and therefore I'll drop $100,000 or whatever it is to pay for it. No, but how can I get solar panels and have the working man subsidize that? And that's what Washington, D.C. Has really become, in large respect with both parties, is the cronyism, the collusion between big business and big government and wealthy elites who really do not care about the average American taxpayer. They only care about using taxpayers to line their pockets and allow them to live a lavish lifestyle.
I'll take it one step further. Everything you just said, 100% true. I'll take it one step further. This is really disgusting. Most of the solar panels that we're talking about that are being purchased right now with tax subsidies that are subsidizing the income tax of, say, the rich and the more elite, most of those solar panels say made in China. That is an industry that they are exporting. Now, if you go to the interior of China, are they living off of renewables? Absolutely not. They're using coal-fired plants, okay? The kinds of things that we can – by the way, we have an overabundance of natural resources here in the United States, in North America. We have the largest oil reserve worldwide. The Permian Basin is enough to power the planet for over 100 years. We have that right there in Texas. And because of fracking and because of deep shell and exploration, oil exploration, we were able to basically extract those resources from the earth. We also have natural coal. You go to eastern Kentucky, you go to parts of West Virginia, Germany right now. Big, advanced, progressive Germany is going back to coal-fired plants because they absolutely cannot subsist apart from it. And they recognize that. Their grid has all kinds of rolling blackouts because they do not have enough energy. So the really scary thing about this is that China is on the attack, and they're attacking we have vast energy reserves, but they're attacking these things using Marxism. And they're hollowing out our own industry, which is critical to our own economic viability and then obviously to our national security, hollowing out those things and then replacing them with things that don't work. So people are buying up with tax subsidies and with all of these incentives. They've been incentivized to do so, these resources in order to then to shift from fossil fuels, from things that work to things that don't.
Mm-hmm. Well, 100%. Now, talking about loving our neighbors, what about the environmental degradation of digging and drilling for all these minerals, these rare earth minerals? And in some, and you think China's labor standards are up to speed, right? Yeah, okay. Or these other places around the globe in Africa where they're, basically using child labor all the time. So the hypocrisy. But I wanted to bring it back to the worldview portion of it. The reason why that you have many Christians being used almost as patsies here, as pawns to get conservatives to change their support, their traditional support, is because, you know, it comes down to with social issues, progressive. There's no way a progressive can say, you know, all right, Christians, you need to forget your objection to same-sex marriage or transgenderism, all these gender identity isms out there, and like you really need to support. They can't make a Christian case, right? You can't do it. Or so forget your pro-life support. We can't. You know, it doesn't matter whether you know a baby is born or not, or late-term abortion. It doesn't matter about that. You know, you can support Gavin Newsom. It's fine. He won't put a marker on when a baby shouldn't be butchered in the womb. You can support. They can't, right? They can't make a pro-abortion case for Christianity or a pro-genderism case, as the left defines it, for Christianity. So they have to look at a social issue that they can sort of they can blackmail Christians with.
Yeah.
They can convince them. And it's growing, and it has been with climate change, again, because they use language like creation care, and they'll quote Genesis 1:26 through 28 and Genesis 2:15 about man's stewardship in the Garden of Eden and having dominion and filling the earth. They'll quote the cultural mandate. And so they're trying to put it in Christianese. You can't put abortion in Christianese. You can't put any type of the left's radical sexual ideology in Christianese. But you sort of can put creation care in Christianese.
Yeah.
Not that I'm saying they have a logical case, but it's far easier to do. So the left has found sort of a cudgel where they can club older evangelicals with, the 40-plus crowd, that can sniff out what's going on because of experience, and they're trying to get the younger evangelicals to say, yeah, we're pro-life, we don't believe marriage is just one man, one woman, and there are only two genders, but we should consider these creation care issues. It's very slick, and that's what's going on here.
Yep.
Since 1971, Liberty University has had one mission: training champions for Christ. We've been at this for a while, and in the shadow of the Blue Ridge Mountains, we have grown to be a global force. Today, Liberty runs over 100,000 students around the globe, studying across 15 colleges and schools. And among them, over 30,000 military students. Across 700 programs of study, we train as one: nurses, artists, business leaders of the future and today. Together, we work to give back through service trips, local community work, and over 500,000 volunteer hours per year. And we play just as hard as we study, with 20 NCAA athletic programs and 40 club sports teams. So, who are we? We are Liberty University, and we train champions for Christ.
Yeah, let me add something to that, and you're absolutely right. This is, by the way, this kind of talking point has made its way into deep pockets of the evangelical right, or conservative evangelicalism, and I don't mean that politically. I mean that biblically conservative. Those who are holding fast to the Word of God, in biblical inerrancy, biblical doctrine. Those whose church ecclesiology and polity, their governance is very conservative, have not changed at all over the past 100 years due to social pressures. They've not become more progressive. These are not your typical mainline churches, what I'm talking about. But the pro-life argument flipped and weaponized in order to cajole conservatives towards a more progressive framework goes like this. This is how it sounds. Pro-life isn't just about the womb. Pro-life is about, Jason, all of life. Well, that sounds right. Pro-life is about all of life from womb to tomb. And so when you hear that kind of language, you think, well, wait a second, on its face, that's not wrong. I agree with that. But here's what ends up happening. So things that we would say triage in terms of what is the greatest care and concern. We cannot tackle all fronts at the same time. It creates a space, a running lane. It creates room for evangelicals to really push hard on the climate issue, right? There's some other issues. Maybe it might be mass immigration. So we need to have more open borders. We need to be more friendly in those areas. But it pushes on other fronts so that instead of, for example, dealing with the more radical things that are going on in the sexual revolution, the more radical cases in states that want, abortion up to and including after birth, right? Partial birth abortion, and even after that a doctor or physician should be able to make the choice that whether a child live or die, much like the Greeks did, right? Back in the ancient world. Absolutely unspeakable evil. It makes room for saying that doesn't need to be as big of a priority. We need to prioritize these other things evenly. And so we need to redistribute our political capital or our political concern about these things. And then it creates this great diaspora, if you will. And so instead of having a priority and saying, no, first things first, if there's human and child sacrifice, we take care of that first. And then we can worry about the crickets and we can worry about the other things with less concern or less priority. Yeah,
well, 100%. It's disingenuous. I think you're a little more charitable than I would describe it. And I'll give you an example. There's one very large evangelical group, and they would probably classify themselves as conservative, theologically conservative. And yet, if you go on their website or see the reports, they don't put anything out on transgenderism. I mean, transgenderism, kids are getting literally their body parts chopped off, right?
Right.
Nothing about that, or how far liberalism has gone with the subject of abortion, right? It used to be safe, legal, and rare. That was Bill Clinton.
Yeah.
Right? 25 years later, what is it? It's, as you noted, it's not only up until birth, but, some governors have said, well, if it's the baby's born and it's going through some issues, it's up to the doctor and the mom to decide. So that's how far we've come in just since Bill Clinton was president.
Real quick. In Ohio, for those listening, in Ohio, Proposition 1 that they're looking to pass in Ohio that basically makes a constitutional protection for abortion, they're using these three words. It's about freedom. It's about family. Oh, and it's about faith. Why? Because in Ohio, it's a plus 16 Republican state. Mm-hmm. And so they have to message along those lines. So they have to turn the words euphemistically towards faith, family, freedom in order to what? Promote abortion.
Sure. Yeah. And then it becomes by what standard, right? Because if you go into, what faith are you talking about promoting abortion? But this one evangelical group I have in mind, they have report after report when it comes to climate change. And they basically parrot and copy the UN. And all the hysteria that's out there, they'll just mimic it. But yet you look at the reports on transgenderism or abortion or any of these serious social issues, or just kids maybe, there's minority kids being suffocated in these awful performing public schools, or the indoctrination, the godless, the paganism of the public school system, especially major blue cities. There's nothing. They're silent on it. And I believe if they're silent on it, they may not admit this, but it's that when it comes down to it, politically, they may be theologically conservative, but politically, they're progressive. And they want to advance a progressive message, and they're willing to do it through disingenuous ways. So they engaged in triage as well. They just put abortion and transgenderism at the bottom of the list, and creation care, that's at the top. Even though I think, Ryan, we have 5 years left until AOC said the planet is going to be annihilated.
Yeah.
Like 5 years left, maybe 2 years, according to Greta Thunberg. Right. So we're running up against time here. So maybe people are right. Maybe we should triage in their direction.
They'll find a way to put more time on the clock for sure. I won't hold my breath on the end of the world coming when they say it is. But let me ask you this, as we're wrapping up, Jason, and really appreciate all you do for the Standing for Freedom Center here at Liberty University. This really is about the next generation. It really is about Gen Z, Gen Alpha that's coming up right after, and in another 5, 6, 7 years, Gen Alpha will start to be of age, and very, very soon, where they're going to be going out, leaving home, leaving mom and dad, and we're about preparing and equipping the next generation with a biblical worldview to take on the world as champions for Christ. Why is it so important to ensure that the next generation is equipped, that they're trained, that they're educated with a biblical worldview according to, really important, the Word of God and nothing else?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, discipleship is going to happen in culture, whether you like it or not. And the question that becomes, who are you going to allow to disciple those close to you? They can be your kids. I'm a father of 4. I know you're a father. So I know who's going to be discipling in my household, and I know who's going to be discipling in your household, right? We're setting the discipleship. Churches need to understand that they have to have rigorous discipleship programs, that they just have to speak to culture and these cultural issues. One of the reasons I really enjoy writing for the Freedom Center is because we get to highlight different groups like Cornwall Alliance and others that don't get amplified by the mainstream media because they don't fit into the narrative. And we can show, listen, there actually is a biblical way for stewardship that doesn't parrot what you hear from Bernie Sanders or Joe Biden. And here is the biblical backing to it, and here's alternative facts to consider or interpretations that, again, don't make their way into the mainstream media. So it all comes down to discipleship and knowing that the left really is after our kids. And we can see this on display, of course, with the radical gender ideology. Many of these individuals, you look at them and you're like, this person isn't even going to be reproducing, right? They're not going to have a family. What are they? I mean, come on, you're not going to have. Why are you so interested in the public school? You know why they're so interested in the public school, or they're so interested in these drag queen story hours at libraries or whatever public event?
Yeah.
Is because they can't reproduce within their own family and create one of their own. So they view the public as large as that reproduction. But we have to understand that there really is a war of worldviews going out there. And it's up to us to discern what those worldviews are and to speak to the worldview according to the ultimate worldview. And that is the one where it starts in the beginning, God. Every single ideology, every single philosophy has a starting point. Ours is in the beginning, God. It flows from that point on, and we have to be able to speak to every single area of life, a variety of issues from that starting point, because the left is doing it as well. We're going to do it as well. And you know what? We're going to see which worldview actually makes sense in terms of the world around us, which provides us the preconditions, as Greg Bonson used to say, which worldview provides the preconditions for intelligibility? What makes sense about morality? What makes sense about evil in the world? What makes sense about the intrinsic design that we see all around us? What makes sense about family structures and governments and limits on government? How can we do this? And I think the Christian worldview, you would agree, provides the best answers for this. We have to be unapologetic about that. And that's what I love about the Freedom Center. We're unapologetic about it, and we're providing ammunition to equip people for a biblical worldview.
Amen. Brother, thank you so much for joining us, and I really appreciate all you're doing to advance the cause of the kingdom. Folks, we make no apologies at the Freedom Center, but stick around for final thoughts. Hey, thank you for joining the Give Me Liberty podcast. Look, do not be deceived. God is not mocked. Whatever a man sows in Marxism, that he will also reap. Listen, the youngest generation has to be protected. And one of the things we have to understand is that biblical truth is absolutely paramount. We cannot mince words. We have to get straight to the heart of the matter. And the heart of the matter is the gospel of Jesus Christ. Look, if you're a student right now, your ministry starts today as a Christian, as a believer. So I think it's absolutely critical that we press in, lean in to the Word of God. Marxism is certainly a threat. We're going to be talking about more of these topics on upcoming podcasts, but we wanted today just to unpack climate Marxism. I really appreciate Jason Mattera's work on this. I encourage you to go to the Standing for Freedom website, take a look at that and all of our other content. Please like and subscribe and share with a friend. Until next time, God bless you.